Countrywide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam-Lamp.
MP for Napier, Katie Nimon. The closing of the McCain processing factory in Hastings has caused a lot of concern in the community. Huge amount of farming and growing in that area has been very concerning. There is a discussion, though, about a realistic or about a grower-led buyout of the McCain facility. Katie, g'day. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate your time on the show.
Thank you for having me. And actually, I am in Napier, although you probably can't tell behind me because I'm in a room with a very blank white wall.
You're right. I can't tell. And normally we would get a beautiful view of the beautiful city of Napier. In fact, the Hawke's Bay. Who doesn't love the Hawke's Bay on on any day, actually?
I know. I mean, I should do what you do and have a nice backdrop behind me. So I'll note that one.
Okay. All right, you do that. Hey, Katie, obviously a lot of concern in your district in Napier, Hastings, about the closure of the McCain's factory. But the growers, the community are not taking it lying down, right? We've spoken to the mayor of Central, I was trying to remember his name actually off the top of my head, Central Hawke's Bay Council.
Will Foley.
Yes. And you guys are driving it. What is the situation right now?
Yeah, well, and good question. So in the situation at the moment, obviously you're right, the community hasn't taken it lying down, particularly the growers, because of course it's their livelihood. So the council came to us a while ago, various councils, the mayors, and said, look, we want to have a meeting, we want to discuss it. So Catherine, my counterpart, the MP for Tuki, her and I brought Todd McClay, the Minister for Agriculture, up to Hawke's Bay. We had that conversation. We talked about what they want to see. The mayors put in their asks, and of course the minister was very proactive with what we need to do. And as a result, there has been $50,000 given to the growers who put forward their interest in doing a feasibility study to see whether they could make it work to have a cooperative to put forward their own solution, potentially taking over the McCain's factory with a pipeline for their own produce, which is a potentially really great option for the region. Ultimately, what we want to see is someone take that plant on so that the growers are still able to provide the produce through and have the jobs that were there as well.
So effectively a co-op, is that the structure? Is that what's being discussed?
Yep, so that's what the growers are looking at, and that's certainly one of the options. And we've seen really great examples of where that works, whether it's Fonterra or Ravensdown. You can sort of structure it retrospectively, or you can structure it in advance. That's however you want to slice it. But how I've been explaining it is this $50,000 for the feasibility study is really for the growers to be able to test the commercial viability of the option, because we've had various people saying, hey, actually we want an inquiry to hear why it is that McCain's are shutting down. Ultimately, that's a commercial decision for them to make. The flip side is let's give a bit of financial support to these growers to be able to test the theory for themselves to see whether or not they can make that stack up.
What's been the response then? I've heard a lot of response from the community, a lot of response from the politicians. What about McCain's themselves? It's their factory, right? It's their, as you said, it's their business decision. What's been their attitude? Are they going, hey, fill your boots, if you can make it work, do it?
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as things go, they've been pretty quiet. They've gone through their process with their staff, which is what they're entitled to do, but they're also not entitled to solve this for the next person. So I think they've been putting their business and their staff first through the process, decommissioning equipment by the sounds of it, going through all of that. They haven't indicated that they'd be there to sort of help support the next person, because ultimately the next person's going to become competition for them. So that's something we have to factor in. If we're expecting them to help facilitate somebody else taking over the factory, I don't imagine they're going to be necessarily jumping at the opportunity. And I think that's very realistic and reasonable to not expect them to do that.
Yeah, so reading between the lines, not being overly helpful in the process, but cash is king, right? If someone comes up with the dollars and say, we want to buy your factory, but they're going to continue the decommissioning process during this time. When is the factory due to close? When do they actually close up? Like the way the discussion has been framed, it's gone already, but I don't think it has. It's probably still operating.
January next year.
Okay, so
and these things take time, right? You've got commitment, you've got the produce, you've got the production line. I mean, you've got orders. This is the problem we have in politics too, is that we have to communicate something well in advance of it happening. And you have this challenge of people thinking that it's already happened or it's happening right now, because notice needs to be given. And so, yes, effectively, they may as well have shut down the day they announced it. But no, they're still technically there until January. And in fact, I drove past it yesterday. It's still very much in action. But if you wait until January to do something, you've got a problem, which is why the growers are working on their solution at the moment.
Yeah, when we were talking, we've talked about this a couple of times on the show, but there seemed to be like a 6-week period when decisions needed to be made or something needed to be put in place. Is that still the case? It seemed to be an urgency.
Oh, I'm with you. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand the full reason or rationale for that, but I do appreciate urgency. There's I guess a sense of urgency in that, McCain's could sell, even though they don't necessarily plan to be out until January, they could be putting it on the market and selling it tomorrow for all I know. So I think urgency is important in that case, but the rationale for the 6 weeks, I'm not across why that is specific.
Okay. How big a deal then is this for your community if this sells? Because, like a lot of people will go, well, this is a business decision by McCain's. They can do what they like, really. But farmers can adjust. They can change crops. They can do different things. Why is it such a big deal for your community?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important question there. There's two aspects to that. You could look at it from one end of the sort of the spectrum, I guess, and say, well, I can't imagine the factory is going to be demolished. It's an industrial area. Something will be done with it. And a job's a job in that kind of statistical sense. And so, hey, if someone comes in and turns it into some other kind of processing plant, brilliant, because there'll be jobs out of it. And likewise, the work that we're doing for the resource management reform, we're going to see the ability for people to change land use a bit more readily. If you want to, turn your property into a dairy or plant a different crop, go for gold. So there's that sort of side of it. Ultimately, as long as the grower can still grow something that has value and the job still exists, good. But on the other end of the spectrum, what it really means to the community is that's the purpose. That's what they've always done. They've always been growing peas, and the pea harvest that comes every year, or that part of the process. I have a whole lot of friends that are contractors that contract harvest and do all that work. There's a whole ecosystem to the McCain's factory. It's a part of people's identity and the work that they do, and we are known in this region for growing produce, whether it's sort of apples or peas and carrots and corn. Losing that identity is hard to swallow. And so I think you've got to look at it from the whole parameter as, as long as there's jobs and, value for the land, brilliant. But ideally it's the identity and what it means to people.
Okay. The other thing though, I'm just interested in this. There's been, obviously we're talking about McCain's here and the vegetables and the growers, but also in your area, you've got significant challenges with the viticulture industry at the moment. Why is there such a focus on this and not potentially on the viticulture? Because there's, my understanding, it's pretty dire in some places. Yeah.
And you know what? Brilliant point, because actually it's who gets the media attention. The growers have, for want of a better word, lobbied really hard and really well, the local councils, the mayors, and made this a front and centre issue. It's got new media attention. Shutting down a factory, from a Labour perspective, it gets news. Whereas if you think about vines, quite often the processing is somewhere else. And the vines sort of stand on their own. And yes, there's people that harvest them and there's some people that manage them. But it's a kind of a bit more of a satellite operation. And so you don't have that same lobby. And also, can I just say, beverage, alcohol, it's a little bit harder to cry out, woe is me. I understand and appreciate it, because from Hawke's Bay, that's a massive part of who we are, right? We're known for our old brands, Mission, Church Road, Tamata. They are who we are. People are drinking less. I've had a lot to discuss with the viticulture sector they're wanting to adapt, and good on them. There's people are still drinking beverages, they're just not as alcoholic. And so there's a lot that we can do there to adapt. And I think that goes to the McCain's and the Watties discussion. People aren't eating frozen vegetables like they used to. It's not part of our everyday diet that it once was. And so, we do expect our businesses and therefore our growers to adapt to that. But ultimately, they're all having a hard time. We need to allow them to do what they need to with their land. And great example, Delegate had a massive vineyard in Crownthorpe. It was a dairy farm. When dairy wasn't doing exceptionally well, and then there's this big sort of dirty dairy rhetoric, it got bought and turned into vines. Well, look, maybe it goes back into dairy. Who knows? We need to allow that to happen, but at the same time, we've also got to enable those sectors to adapt themselves and be able to innovate.
All right, Katie, we're out of time. We're out of time, but fantastic. Thanks so much for your time on the show. Really interesting to talk about it. We'll watch this with interest. We'll check back in and see how it's going and whether there's any progress. But have a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, hey, thanks. Look forward to it.
All right, Katie Nimon there, MP for Napier.
Countrywide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam-Lapp.